With Honeylove, we can all say goodbye to uncomfortable underwire and bulky fabrics that trap heat. Plus, for November only, Honeylove is giving up to 50% off site-wide. Visit honeylove.com/weirdest to shop their sale and let them know we sent you when the survey asks. Honeylove's best-selling crossover bra is so comfortable, it feels like you're not really wearing anything. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save up to 50% off site-wide at honeylove.com/weirdest this month only. Inventory is limited and the sale ends soon, so don't miss their best deals of the year. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Elevate your comfort, elevate your style. Thanks to Honeylove. I love getting a great deal on something, but when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with a purchase of a 3-month plan, I was like, I'm not buying it. But it turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. Go to mintmobile.com/weirdest. There you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/weirdest. That's mintmobile.com/weirdest. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/weirdest. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. You can restore your zen and embrace the natural power of hemp with Vaya. Vaya says their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and calming drops are all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. Vaya ships legally to almost all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door. So if you're 21 plus, check out our link to Vaya's website in our description and use code WEIRDEST for 15% off. I'm really looking forward to trying Vaya's gummies because they have everything from 0 milligrams of THC to 100 milligrams. So I know that they'll have me covered no matter what kind of vibe I'm looking for. This holiday season, gift yourself some peace of mind. If you're 21 plus, check out the link to Vaya in our description and use the code WEIRDEST to receive 15% off. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This holiday season, enhance your every day with Vaya. At Popular Science, we report and write dozens of science and tech stories every week. And while most of the stuff we stumble across makes it into our articles, we also find plenty of weird facts that we just keep around the office. So we figured, why not share those with you? Welcome to The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week from the editors of Popular Science. I'm Rachel Feltman.
I'm Laura Baisas.
And I'm Laura Krantz.
Laura and Laura, both welcome back to the show. It's been longer since we had you on, but you have another fantastic book. You've been on here talking about your book about Bigfoot and your book about aliens, and now you're here with another banger. Would you tell folks a little bit about it?
Yes, book number 3 is called Do You Believe in Magic? And now I have put a little musical earworm in your head that you will have through the whole rest of this episode.
Probably the rest of the month.
Probably the rest of your life. Yeah, that will not go away. You can thank me later. This book is about the intersection of science and magic and how a lot of what we think of as being kind of silly and magical actually has some roots in science. And a lot of the sciences that are out there that we trust and love actually have their root in some of these more magical practices. I say that in air quotes.
Nice. It's one of my favorite sort of like history of science facets. I love talking to like medieval scholars, historians who study the medieval era, not talking to medieval scholars, which I'm sure would be great, but I don't really know how to make it happen.
Yeah, are magical.
But I recently, for my other show, Science Quickly at Scientific American, I recently got to talk to somebody who studies astrology and astronomy in scientific history. Fun. One time we had, I don't know if folks remember the time we had Jonathan Sims, who to me, I was like, this is the biggest celebrity we've ever had on. He writes a horror podcast that I'm really obsessed with called The Magnus Archives and The Magnus Protocol. And he was also super into the history of alchemy. So yeah, I always feel like we don't do this kind of stuff enough on Weirdest Thing. And I'm so excited to read your book. I'm sure our listeners will love it. And as always, we're really excited to have you share some weird tidbits that you learned along the way. So thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me again.
So let's just dive right into it. On the weirdest thing I learned this week, we start by each offering up a little tease about some fact or story that we found in the course of reading, writing, reporting, looking for Bigfoot, etc., and decide which one we just absolutely have to hear more about first. Then once we've all had time to spin our little science yarns, we reconvene and decide what the weirdest thing we learned this week actually was. I almost slipped up and said, and talk about what the weirdest thing we learned this week actually was, which is maybe the edit I should finally make to this intro. I feel like it's a little softer. It doesn't imply competition. But anyway, it's whatever. We have fun.
Everybody wins.
It's true.
Wins. Yep.
Everybody wins when we're talking about weird things. So I'll start with my tease, which is that I want to talk about mummy cheese.
Mummy cheese?
Mummy
like
cheese.
Cheddar?
It's cheese
I don't
and
know
it
if I wanna know
involves
about this.
mummies. Some very old dairy.
Has everyone stop eating?
Yes, yeah.
I promise that this story actually is more appetizing than it sounds.
Okay.
Laura B., what's your tease?
Okay. Ant farms are way more than just a toy. They're real.
We are
Ooh.
farmers.
Well, now everyone has a new earworm.
Yeah, we knocked out the Love and Spoonful and put in a State Farm jingle.
Solid downgrade. So you're welcome for that. And Laura Krantz, what is your tease?
I am going to talk about how superstitions are actually scientific, and it has been proven in a laboratory.
Jess is so excited.
I wrote a story on that with baseball and how baseball superstitions are scientific.
Yeah.
So I'm excited to hear your spin. This is exciting.
I loved that story, Jess. I remember it fondly, especially because I remember when you pitched it and you were like, so it's baseball. And everyone was like, okay. So like physics, and you were like, no.
Yeah, sports people are like some of the most like superstitious people out there.
Yes. As
For
one
sure.
of them, I can classify.
No comment.
Why don't we start with ant farms? I would love to
Alright.
hear more about that. Yeah.
Okay, great. So everyone remembers those little plastic toys that we had. I believe they came out circa the 1970s, where, you had your little sand and your plastic windmill. They sold pretty well, and they were called ant farms. But it turns out that ants in real life, not just in that little plastic toy, are actually farmers. Many species are. And they acquired this agrarian lifestyle largely because of the asteroid that struck the Earth and wiped out, you get it, guessed it, the dinosaurs.
Whoa.
Yes.
What a connection.
What a connection. That's why science is great.
I did not see that coming.
Neither did the dinosaurs.
Oh, ouch. Too soon? Gosh. So, obviously the dinosaurs are kind of our poster children for what happens to life on Earth during a mass extinction event. What comes after the dust from an asteroid strike covers the planet and wipes out megafauna can actually, though, be a boon for tons of other organisms. The rise of mammals came at the expense of the dinosaurs. Even the grapes that we love today for wine kind of saw their kind of increased and started to proliferate more because the dinosaurs weren't around. And ants were also able to take advantage of this new post-dino world. So according to a new study that was recently published in the journal Science, colonies of ants turned into fungi farmers after an asteroid struck the coast of Mexico about 68 to 66 million years ago. Famously, that is the one that took out the dinosaurs. All this devastation created the ideal conditions for various fungi to thrive, and these crafty ants decided to cultivate the fungi and created this evolutionary partnership between the fungi that's still intact to this day. Pretty cool, because, we tend to think, that humans are the only farmers when actually there are some other species that can be considered agriculturalists. But importantly, what even is ant agriculture? Study co-author and Smithsonian research entomologist Ted Schultz kind of explained it to me that fungus farming ants grow these little fungi gardens for food. The species can be considered agriculturalists, and they tend these fungus gardens underground in their elaborate and sprawling colonies that we saw depicted in the Pixar film A Bug's Life.
And Ants, that other one.
Ants, that's right. They came out like the same year.
Which they did at the same time.
You liked it
I really
better?
loved Ants as a kid simply because I had it on VHS. Like, I think objectively anyone would say A Bug's Life is a better movie, but Ants was the one available to me.
And it did have the classic line, "You to Ant," which just, come on. Beautiful. I forgot that there were 2 animated battling bug movies in the late 90s. So yes, they have these little fungi gardens in the colonies that we can see in the films A Bug's Life and Ants. There you go. On these little fungi gardens, they fertilize the fungus and keep it clean and free from disease. They are not entirely unique in this. There are a couple other non-human agriculturalists. There are some termites that are known to do this, and also ambrosia beetles. Roughly 250 different species of ants throughout the Americas and the Caribbean are known to farm this fungi. And researchers organize them into these 4 basic agricultural systems based on the strategies that they use to cultivate. These most advanced strategies are known as higher agriculture, and that belongs to leafcutter ants, which I think a lot of people are familiar with. You've seen pictures of them literally carrying leaves, like little palm branches, kind of. They will harvest small bits of this fresh vegetation to feed their fungi from the leaves, and this fungi then grows into food for the ants that fuels these super colonies of leafcutter ants that can number into the millions, which we also saw in both of those films. So in this new paper, a team of scientists from institutions all over the world analyzed the genetic data of 475 different species of fungi and 276 species of ants. From that, they found 288 fungi species that ants cultivate and 208 species that are known to cultivate fungi. So quite a few species on both ends of the spectrum as far as this partnership. So they use that genetic data to do that meticulous and detailed work of building evolutionary trees, which are kind of what they sound like. It's basically a family tree, but showing the evolution of these different species. These trees not only show how different things adapted, but it can also serve as a timeline. And this helped them pinpoint when ants began to utilize certain fungi. And sure enough, about 66 million years ago, it shows that that's when ants and fungi started to be intertwined, right around when that asteroid struck and wiped out our friend the T-Rex. As described, so speaking of T-Rex, as described so eloquently in Jurassic Park by chatty young dinosaur enthusiast Tim. I always bring everything back to Jurassic Park. I'm just pointing that out.
Finest movie ever made.
I have one talent, and that is everything can relate back to Jurassic Park when you really try hard enough. So speaking of T-Rex, as described so eloquently in Jurassic Park by our chatty young dinosaur enthusiast named Tim, the cataclysmic collision of the asteroid and the Earth filled the atmosphere with dust and debris. Sunlight was blocked, so plants could not perform photosynthesis for several years, and roughly half of all plant species on Earth were wiped out, along with the dinosaurs. However, silver lining, this was a real boom for the fungi. In turn, the ants started to use this fungi for food, and they continued to rely on them even as the rest of life on the planet started to rebound after the mass extinction event. But it did take another 40 million years or so for them to develop the higher agriculture that we see in leaf cutters to this day. They got that really higher degree of cultivation about 27 million years ago when a rapid cooling period changed the landscapes all over the world. For example, present-day South America, there were these drier habitats and woody savannas and grasslands that kind of fractured off various ecosystems. And when the ants took the fungi out of the more tropical forests into these newer dry areas, they isolated the fungi from their other ancestral populations. And this isolated fungi then became very dependent on the ants for their survival in those arid conditions. So kind of symbiotic-ish. It's not necessarily parasitic, but it's not necessarily like working hand in hand. They're still eating the fungi. And this is what set that stage for that higher agricultural system, this kind of constant changing after the asteroid strike and ants using the fungi, making little fungi gardens underground. According to Schultz, when he and I spoke, like most human farmers, they also have to deal with crop diseases. And which kind of makes sense when you have a lot of fungi in a given area, but ants are kind of well suited to that. There are numerous studies that have shown that ants really put the ant in antibiotic. You know how long I've been waiting to say that one?
Your whole life.
Months. Yes. Ants really put the ant in antibiotics and they can use their saliva to heal their comrades' wounds and even control outbreaks on their farms with an antibiotic herbicide. These herbicides are actually derived from bacteria that they culture on their own bodies. However, like with anything antibiotic related, they also can face increased antibiotic resistance if they're not careful. So over time, they have had to develop some new antibiotic strategies to deal with these types of outbreaks. Just kind of a nice comparison point. Humans, we've been cultivating crops for roughly 12,000 years and using antibiotics for less than 100-ish. Ants, millions of years. So as we continue to face that that growing antibiotic resistance, ants could be just another way to search for ways to cope with it and develop some new ones. So I just was really struck by this idea of not only ants being farmers, because that's just pretty cute and really just mind-blowing, but also just kind of how long and how they kind of have continued to come up with these new ways to not only take care of themselves, but at the same time taking care of other parts of the planet. And I always like to end my segments with a question. It's just because I like to ask questions. So for you both, if you could go back and trace the evolution of any one organism, what would it be and why?
Oh, that's such a good question.
I got to say, I am now kind of interested in fungi because the way you described what happened with fungi after the asteroid impact sounds like The Last of Us.
Yes.
Except it's like for everything living on the planet then. Yeah, I find that they're particularly fascinating, fungi are, and just like the way that they have survived. And
fungi are so interesting. If I had to pick a favorite kingdom, that would be my favorite kingdom. But I have the thing that
they're so fun.
Yeah,
they're just fun.
They're fun.
But the thing that came to mind for me was platypus. I want to know.
Oh yeah,
I want to know
one.
everything about how God's little mistake happened.
Almost any marsupial, like they're just really are
something weird, something mind-boggling, something indefensible from an evolutionary standpoint. I want to see the play-by-play.
I love it.
Also, is your thought finished? Because I have an answer for this too.
Yes, just.
I need to know about the hyrax. People who follow me on Instagram know I'm obsessed with the hyrax, but they're like related to elephants and manatees, not like, wombats and whatever else.
Really?
Or rodents,
No way.
Yeah. I did do an episode on it because I love them. And they sing for dominance instead of fight. They're perfect. The best. Anyway.
I kind of love that.
Along with the hyrax.
I'm totally picturing, karaoke bars where that's where the assertion for dominance in these, communities happen. Yeah, absolutely.
Wow. I love those ants.
Has anyone ever done a study on like what, you go out in the backyard, you've got your ant farm that you bought, you go out into the backyard and you kidnap some ants, you basically abduct them like aliens. Like, what is the emotional toll on the colony from something like that? And what is the emotional toll on the poor ants that are now trapped in this plastic
instead of in their
a windmill? Yeah. Yeah, there we go. Future scientists,
please.
There's something for you to do.
Absolutely.
Junior Dr. Wilsons.
All right, we're going to take a quick break and then we'll be back with some more facts. This year, I'm thankful for Honeylove because there's nothing worse than suffering through wearing an uncomfortable bra or piece of shapewear. With Honeylove, we can all say goodbye to uncomfortable underwire and bulky fabrics that trap heat. Honeylove's bras feature supportive bonding that eliminates the need for underwire without sacrificing lift. Plus, for November only, Honeylove is giving up to 50% off site-wide. Visit honeylove.com/weirdest to shop their sale and let them know we sent you when the survey asks. You know that feeling when you get home from a long day and immediately want to take off your bra? With Honeylove, you'll never have to wait for that feeling again, because Honeylove's best-selling crossover bra is so comfortable, it feels like you're not really wearing anything. And Honeylove's shapewear is also a game changer. It's just as easy to put on as it is to take off. Easy. Treat yourself to the best bras and shapewear on the market and save up to 50% off site-wide at honeylove.com/weirdest this month only. Inventory is limited and the sale ends soon, so don't miss their best deals of the year. After you purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. Elevate your comfort, elevate your style. Thanks to Honeylove. I love getting a great deal on something, but it has to be easy. I'm not gonna crawl belly deep through hell to save a few bucks. So when Mint Mobile said it was easy to get wireless for $15 a month with a purchase of a 3-month plan, I was like, I'm not buying it. But it turns out it really is that easy to get wireless for $15 a month. Mint Mobile's website makes every step of the way super easy. And they say that the longest part of the process is waiting on hold to break up with your old provider. To get started, go to mintmobile.com/weirdest. There, you'll see that right now, all 3-month plans are only $15 a month, including the unlimited plan. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/weirdest. That's mintmobile.com/weirdest. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/weirdest. $45 upfront payment required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customers on first 3-month plan only. Speed slower above 40 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Additional taxes, fees, and restrictions apply. See Mint Mobile for details. Okay, we're back, and I'm going to jump into my fact, mummy cheese. So we've talked a lot about cheese here on Weirdest Thing, infamously, and listeners already know it can benefit from aging, I'm sure. I myself have a nice 12-month Manchego or so, 6-month or 12-month. I'm not picky, but I do understand that it's like the Manchego is not supposed to be new. That's what they tell me. How about you guys? What are your favorite cheeses?
Ooh.
I do love Manchego, but honestly, a really good cheddar, I feel like it's kind of hard to beat.
I'm going to shamelessly plug a place. My favorite cheese of all time is the fresh ricotta from a little Italian specialty store in Lincroft, New Jersey called Aleo, I believe. We always called it Aleo, but we were corrected. It's Aleo. It is so good and so sweet and tastes amazing on Italian bread. So fresh ricotta cheese. Really, nothing is better.
Can we take a lunch break and then come back?
Yes.
Yeah, Brie, classic choice.
Brie is my everything.
Yes.
And also the fried cheese curds from Culver's.
Yes. Oh, I miss I went to undergrad in Wisconsin, and Culver's was maybe one of my favorite parts of undergrad. Love Culver's.
Well, scientists have found some cheese that's been developing its funk for perhaps a little longer than is ideal. It is 3,500 years old. And yeah.
Is there a best by date on that?
Not that they can find. But we're not talking trace amounts of fermented dairy found inside a pot, which older traces of that nature have been found before. But this is the oldest chunks of cheese that have been found. And this is a big deal for reasons I'll get into, but they were found somewhere somewhat surprising. They were smeared on the heads and necks of several mummies in northwestern China. I should say they were bodies that were naturally mummified by arid conditions, which also helped the cheese, I think. Not helping it taste good, but helping it still be here in solid cheese form, sort of, 3,500 years later. So this story, like I said, starts about 3,500 years ago, but it also starts back in the 1900s, the 90s, in fact, which is when archaeologists first uncovered these naturally mummified desert burials. They all date back to between around 3,300 and 3,600 years ago, aka the Bronze Age. And at that time, they made note of smears of white stuff on some of the mummies. And they did think that the residue might be from some kind of dairy product. They clocked that immediately. At the time, DNA technology was just not up to the task of identifying random dairy that was 3,000 years old.
Now, I'm not an archaeologist,
Mhm.
just playing on TV. Like, I'm amazed that dairy was kind of the first place that their brains went. That's kind of cool. That like it wasn't. Yeah.
Yeah. And they said, you know, one of the researchers says it doesn't feel like cheese. The samples, they describe them as feeling like dense dust, which I guess is just like,
Well,
you know, it's you know, it's dried out. Otherwise, it wouldn't still be there.
Right.
But you know,
I have found some very dried cheese in the back corner of my refrigerator, so I can only imagine if I left it there for 3 millennia what it would look like.
Exactly. So yeah, DNA technology has come so far in the last 20 odd years. It's kind of wild. And at the time, this was just a no-go. And but they took samples from 3 different tubes and they, you know, put a pin in that. And thank God.
I mean, that's what Watson and Crick really were working towards.
Seriously. What's the point if we can't dig into that cheese? So for this new study, which really just came out, researchers, they took those samples and they extracted mitochondrial DNA for analysis. And that revealed the presence of both cow and goat DNA. So they were like, ka-ching.
Blends.
It's dairy. Yeah. Though one interesting point they made is that while there was both cow product and goat product, they hadn't been mixed in the same batch, which was sort of different from what they know was going on dairy wise in some other parts of the world. So that was very interesting to them. But they were making both goat milk products and cow milk products. And they were then also able to analyze the DNA of the microorganisms within the dairy samples, which confirmed that they were kefir cheese. Now, modern dairy lovers might be more familiar with kefir itself, which is a fermented milk product. It's kind of like a thick milk or a thin yogurt, however you like to think about the viscosity of your fermented dairy. It's traditionally fermented at room temperature, and it yields this like slightly fizzy, slightly alcoholic beverage, though unless you're trying to make it alcoholic, those levels are usually pretty low, akin to kombucha. But consider this a PSA if you're trying to live like a totally zero proof life, temporarily or permanently, and didn't realize kombucha and kefir have a little ethanol in them. They do. And so you should check out the brand you're buying to make sure that you're comfortable with the alcohol percentage in there. And don't mess around with homemade stuff, because that's like pretty much always going to have a higher alcohol content, which can be a bonus if that's what you're going for. But kefir is made by inoculating milk with so-called kefir grains, which are not grains at all. I kind of assumed they were grains. I've never made it myself. I do do a lot of stinky stuff in my kitchen, but this is one thing I haven't gotten around to doing yet. They're these rubbery little clusters of cells that like make a happy home for bacteria and yeast. So super similar to the SCOBY in a jar of kombucha or to a sourdough starter. It's basically, you know, the matrix in which the good microbes live. And when you pop these bad boys into some dairy, it'll keep it from spoiling, at least, you know, spoiling in a bad way. And it'll turn it into, you know, this funky fermented beverage in just a day or so. So not surprising that this was popular in ancient times. Of course, we already knew it was popular in ancient times. But yeah, kefir cheese is basically like when you sort of like overculture it. So it's sort of the more approaching a yogurt than a drinkable yogurt. It becomes a soft cheese. But, you know, what is a cheese? What is a yogurt? What is a buttermilk? The fermented dairy spectrum. There's room for everyone. And yeah, a few researchers have pointed out, you know, how cool this is, because old dairy is really hard to sequence because you don't just have to worry about the DNA itself being old, which of course is a big deal. And again, was why we just couldn't figure this out at all 20 years ago. But you also have to worry about contaminants with modern microbes. So the fact that they were able to, you know, actually identify microbes here, and I'll get into this more in a second, but they specifically looked at them and compared them to modern microbes, and they're different. You know, their species is identifiable, but you can see changes that have occurred in the past 3,500 years. So yeah, they did look closely at these microbes and compare them to their sort of modern counterparts. They they seem to have showed their work and shown that they didn't just pick up random dairy microbe contaminants from like somebody's lunch yogurt. There are a few, in addition to the sort of just like incredible leaps and bounds in DNA tech and, the skill of this research team, they also probably got very lucky with the burial site. These were at the Xiaohe Cemetery in Xinjiang. It was once very lush. It was like along the banks of a river, but then the river changed course quite suddenly in geological terms, and it very quickly became quite arid. So the community had to move, and the bodies that were left there dried out and naturally mummified. And just as those conditions are, better than damp for preserving human DNA, this cheese and its microbes were also probably better preserved thanks to those very arid conditions. But in addition to raising questions about why people were burying their loved ones with some cheese for the road, I mean, maybe that's obvious.
That was my question.
If
why
I
was it on their
die
foreheads?
bury me with cheese snacks. Lay me down on a bed of cheese snacks. The study has helped teach us more about the history of fermented dairy, which, as listeners know from my recent tangent about Bonnie Clabber, I feel very passionately about. Basically, there are two major groups of lactobacillus bacteria, and lactobacillus makes, as you might be able to tell from the name, makes a lot of delicious milk products happen. One of those groups originated from around where Russia is. And that one is the one most used globally for making yogurt and cheese pretty much everywhere. And then there's another group of lactobacillus from Tibet. And there's a long-held belief that kefir originated in the North Caucasus mountain region in what's now Russia. But when scientists took a closer look at this 3,500-year-old yogurt, they found that the lactobacillus that was used to make it is actually more closely related to the Tibetan group. So, they think that this is showing that there were probably like two independent geographic origins of kefir, which makes sense because it's a very simple, it's kind of one of the most simple fermented milk products, right? It's like all you need is to like get lucky once or twice with the right bacteria and yeast showing up while it's sitting out overnight, and then you have your starter culture. So it's not shocking that different people came up with this in different places.
I wonder if there was a microbe trade too, if there was any sort of like, as people's intermingled, thinking Silk Road and all of that, maybe maybe like there was essentially traveling sourdough starter.
Totally. I mean, I think, we see a lot of like, human migration and trade routes influencing what kinds of foods people made and how people preserved food. So totally. They also found some cool genetic changes that have sprung up in the last 3,500 years. Basically, compared to modern lactobacillus, they found that the ancient strains would have been more likely to trigger an immune response in human intestines, which makes sense when you think about it, because like our ancestors probably would have favored batches of kefir that like more people were able to drink safely, and they would have used those cultures more widely. So it seems like that might have, helped those bacteria thrive and sort of win out. And yeah, another important thing to remember is that while it's like wild that they were able to sequence cheese this old, it's not surprising that people were making cheese that long ago. We actually have pretty good evidence that cheese making was going on more than 9,000 years ago in Anatolia or the Levant. And that comes from the sort of like residue style remnants of cheese that I mentioned at the beginning of the fact. Humans have been fermenting dairy for almost certainly as long as they've consumed dairy, because without refrigeration, it was just a necessity. Plus, until around 5,000 years ago, virtually all humans were lactose intolerant. It was the rule, not the exception. Almost no adult could properly digest milk. Then, about 5,000 years ago, a genetic mutation that made people able to guzzle glasses of milk well into adulthood spread like wildfire in Northern Europe. But I think a lot of people don't realize like lactose intolerance is that's the default. And so we've been consuming dairy for at least 9,000 years. And for 4,000 years of that, for the first 4,000 years, almost no one could drink milk without a tummy ache. So what was going on?
Did they also develop antacids and Tums alongside with them? Wondering, is that the next? Is lactate the next thing we're going to find with
little pouches?
Yeah. Well, it seems that fortunately, fermentation was probably the answer. There was a really great PopSci feature a few years back that I'll link to on popsci.com/weird that was about how people in Mongolia are almost all lactose intolerant. Like 95% of the population is lactose intolerant, but they get like a huge portion of their caloric intake, sometimes as much as half or more, from various milk products from all different kinds of animals. And some researchers are very confident that the key is their absolute mastery of fermentation. They make so many different fermented products, and they have like ancestral heirloom starters for various fermented dairy products that I think the phrase that the person who wrote this story used is that like they'll care for it with the attention they'd give a newborn. And so they think that all of the microbes involved in all of those fermented products are ones that really help the gut digest dairy. And while they're kind of like on the extreme end of the spectrum in terms of how heavily they use dairy and how many of them are lactose intolerant, the truth is that, again, up until like 5,000 years ago, that was kind of the situation for everybody. And of course, there are parts of the world where dairy is less of a thing, but it's certainly been a very common foodstuff. There's actually one study suggested that maybe the reason lactose tolerance suddenly became so relatively common from being like basically non-existent is that there were like particular stressors like famines or pathogens. So maybe anybody who already like had a little trouble with dairy was more likely to get sick, not be able to eat enough, get dehydrated, so that the people who like could just, house a bottle of milk without issue were suddenly more likely to survive and reproduce. But yeah, that's my ramp. I'm so interested in the lactose intolerance thing. I remember when that study came out saying like we were all lactose intolerant until 5 years ago, and we ate dairy for 4,000 years before that. I was like, wow, relatable. I'm not actually lactose intolerant, but I'm somewhere on the spectrum. I'm like, I'm not going to drink a whole glass of milk. I'm just not going to do it. And I can really relate because I'm like, honestly, even if I was fully lactose intolerant, in my heart, I have so much tolerance for lactose that I would make it work. But yeah, that's my story for today. Like I said, hopefully you'll agree that it was less gross than the mummy cheese teas made it sound.
Way less gross. Also, I'm fascinated by the idea of caring for your fermented whatever the same way you would a newborn, because I care for my sourdough starter by feeding it once a week and putting it in the back of the fridge.
Yeah. No, definitely.
So I should not be a parent, basically, is what that is.
Yeah, I think they're really on another level there by necessity, because they just make this endless variety of a funky dairy, and maybe all of our tummies would hurt a little less if we did the same. All right, we're going to take one more quick break, and then we'll be back with one more fact. Need a break from the stress of like the whole world? Yeah, I get that. You can restore your zen and embrace the natural power of hemp this holiday and election season with Vaya. Whether you're enjoying a quiet evening at home, white knuckling while you watch the news, or embracing festive cheer, Vaya says their premium THC and THC-free gummies can help you find your perfect balance. Vaya says their award-winning THC and THC-free gummies and vapes, THCA flower, soothing topicals, and scent calming drops are all crafted with the highest quality hemp sourced from trusted, independently owned American farms. And the best part is that Via ships legally to almost all states in the U.S. in discreet packaging directly to your door with a worry-free guarantee. So if you're 21 plus, check out our link to Via's website in our description and use code WEIRDEST for 15% off. I'm really looking forward to trying Via's gummies because they have everything from 0 milligrams of THC to 100 milligrams. So I know that they'll have me covered no matter what kind of vibe I'm looking for. Via says they use compounds found in hemp along with active plant extracts to create products each with a specific effect in mind. So whether you want to get better sleep, ease anxiety, enhance your mood, or just feel kind of nice, they probably have something for you. This holiday season, gift yourself some peace of mind. If you're 21 plus, check out the link to Via in our description and use the code WEIRDEST to receive 15% off. After you purchase, they ask you where you heard about them. Please support our show and tell them we sent you. This holiday season, enhance your everyday with Via.
Okay, we're back. And Laura, let's talk about superstition.
Let's talk about superstition. Okay, I want to start by asking all of you, do you have any superstitions?
Oh, for sure. I would say, I'm trying to think if there are any that I like that I truly cling to as more than just a habit. Because I have plenty that are habits because I'm half Italian. And that Italian side is Catholic, and Roman Catholicism is one of the witchiest.
Full of them. Yes, yes.
Loaded to the gills with superstition.
But yeah, I can't really think of anything where I'm like, oh no, I would be genuinely like worried or creeped out if I didn't do that. But I do throw salt over my shoulder.
Same. People think I'm crazy, but I'm like, there's just something about that where I'm like,
you got to do it.
Can't hurt, might help.
Can't hurt, might help. Isn't that just superstition in a nutshell? It's like, can't hurt, might help.
Yeah. Don't want to risk it. Too scary.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mine mostly
Laura
just
B,
has
do you
to
have
do.
one?
Yeah, it's with swimming, as with most things with me. I basically, and it's partially also just for my health and well-being while I'm in the water. So I will only eat oatmeal and fruit the night before a long swim. I will eat nothing else. I'm not really, oddly enough, also a part Italian and do not really love pasta. So like pasta parties and all of that kind of stuff, not my thing before a long swim. So it was oatmeal. And then it kind of became tailored into my performance when I slipped up once and had some sweet potato fries the night before, and Tum Tum that morning in the river was not happy. So now it is only, again, shameless plug, Bob's Red Mill. It's only it's their steel cut oats and some blueberries, and that is it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jess, do you have one?
Not lately, but back in the day when I played volleyball, I would have the same ball bounce routine before every single serve. Which is, I guess, like a thing with basketball players and free throw shots, too. And when the Cubs were in the running for the World Series in 2016, which they won, I wore my Anthony Rizzo jersey for every game. And like we said earlier, I did not wash it. And by the end, when they won, it was covered in like my makeup and my
Thank
sweat.
God
and
that you did that.
But it's why they won.
It's why they
It
won.
is. Thank you.
It is why they
you
won.
get it. You get it. But yeah, I'm sure I have some today. But, you know, in those critical moments in life, superstitions were helpful.
I think mine are more habitual as well. It's the salt thing. I will knock on wood. Like if someone says something like, this is going to work out, I'm like, we need wood somewhere. I need to pound on that. Like you have just jinxed us. So, you know, the common ones are like walking under a ladder, opening an umbrella in the house, jumping over a crack so you don't break your mother's back. Sometimes I would step on cracks just every once in a while because my mom had really irritated me. It didn't work. So I don't know if I believe in that one. But some of them seem like totally rational. Like, why would you walk under a ladder with the possibility of either getting something dropped on you or knocking someone off of it? That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, if I was working on a ladder and somebody walked underneath it, like, what the hell is wrong with you?
Like, yeah. Also, the opening an umbrella in the house, it's like, well, of course, that's what a terrible idea. Like you're going to knock something over, you're going to poke somebody in the eye. Like some of these just seem like common sense. Some of the other ones, like wearing the lucky sweater or the jersey or the jacket over and over again until, you know, your team wins or, you know, for every presentation you've ever given. I have a friend who would wear the same sweater to every single test in college. And that sweater got a lot of use. It was pretty worn out by the end of 4 years of school. it goes back to that, can't hurt, might help. And this is something that we have done for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. And we've got evidence of superstitious behavior going back, millennia. There was a book from the 4th century BCE written by the philosopher, I'm going to butcher this, Theophrastus. Do you guys know who he is?
No.
Yeah, me neither. I'd never heard of him. So if I got his name wrong, hopefully no one will notice.
Sorry to this man.
Yeah. He's been dead a while. So it contained a series of 30 character sketches, one of which was about the superstitious man. And it reads, "The superstitious man is the kind who washes his hand in 3 springs, sprinkles himself with water from a temple font, puts a laurel sprig in his mouth, and then is ready for the day's perambulations."
Sounds very clean.
Yeah, he sounds like a very clean man. Maybe, I there was part of me that was like, oh, this guy's a little OCD, maybe.
Sure, yeah.
And I wonder actually where OCD and superstition intersects. That's not something I got a chance to look into, but this sort of what brought that question to mind. But it's clear that Theophrastus is sneering a bit at the superstitious people out there, depicting them as silly and irrational, and why would you do these kinds of things? And that sentiment is not one that has gone away. It's persisted very much into the modern day. The superstitions are not scientific or rational. They have no bearing on the outcome of events. But we keep going around ladders and jumping over cracks and wearing lucky sweaters and wearing lucky socks and knocking on wood. And why is that? Why do we persist in irrational behavior? Many psychologists agree that superstitions have to do with a feeling of control. I spoke to one psychologist, is Dr. Stuart Weiss, and he's written a couple of books about magic and superstition and why we continue to sort of invest ourselves in magical thinking, even like truly rational scientific people continue to do this, even though they know that on some level it doesn't have any effect. And he says, it makes sense because people are trying to avoid the worst outcomes and conversely achieve the best ones. And in situations where we absolutely know that the outcome is certain, like there's no doubt whatsoever that it's not going to go exactly as planned, we're really unlikely to engage in superstitious behavior. But at the moments when we feel like things are less certain, and that's where chance enters into the equation, those are the moments when we're likely to fall back on the superstition. So will my sports team win? Am I going to pass this test? Will I nail this presentation? Like those are the moments where you're like, I don't know. And I need a little boost. I need a little bit of help. But is there actually anything scientific about engaging in these behaviors? And it turns out that there might be. There was a team of scientists out of Germany who did an experiment. Now, this study's a little bit older. This is from like 2012, I think. But they were testing the effect of good luck superstitions on people's behavior. They didn't look into bad luck as much. And they designed an experiment to see how superstitions affected participants' performance on a series of tasks. One of them involved like putting a ball into a hole. And what they would do is they would come up to some of the participants and they would say, this is a lucky ball. And other ones, they would just hand them a ball and be like, here's the ball you're going to use. And overall, the people who had been handed the lucky ball had more success in actually executing on this task. There was another one that was a motor skills test. That was like I don't know if you've ever seen these. It's like the boxes where you have to move the ball around and try to get it into the little holes. So it's like a motor skills. And again, it was the kind of thing where if you said to the person, I'm crossing my fingers for you, they would tend to do better than the people you're like, here is your task. So it's like this sort of weird little external boost. But the scientists also pointed out, most of the time you're not getting that externality. The superstitions are very much internal. You're not talking about feeling superstitious. You don't want to voice those sorts of like crazy thoughts. So they designed 2 other experiments that were focused on more your internal emotional feeling. There were 2 tests. One was a matching game, like memory. So flipping cards over and seeing if you could remember the pairs. And then there was a word game, kind of like the spelling bee, if you've ever done that with the New York Times, where you've got to create as many words as possible out of a certain number of letters. And prior to these tests, the scientists called up each participant and told them, first they asked them, do you have a lucky charm? And if the person said yes, then they were told to bring it to the test the next day or later that week. If they didn't have one, they were excluded from the experiment. So this was very much focused on people who had superstitious feelings to begin with. Then, before each of these tests began, or before each participant went into the tests, about half of them had their lucky charm taken away. And what the scientists found was that those who had been allowed to keep their lucky charms felt more confident going into the tasks. Absolutely no surprise there. But they also performed better than the ones who didn't, almost across the board, which raised the possibility for the scientists that superstitious beliefs might actually make a person believe more in their own talents and abilities. So, in other words, it might pay to be superstitious. So, that's my fun fact.
So not something to work against or to say, oh, logic will always win. No, it could actually be something. It could actually help.
Yeah. And they don't have a real good sense why. I think it fits in a little bit with like placebo effect and nocebo effect on the flip side of that, where it's like you are priming yourself to think a certain way, and then that provides a little bit of an extra boost. And even though you know, like deep down, this is just, a charm or a bracelet or a ring, and it doesn't really have magical powers, there's something about having it with you that creates a reaction within your brain and in the way you perform.
Yeah, that totally makes sense to me. Not just logically, but personally, because like the sort of, I don't have like, a lucky shirt or something, but I've definitely sort of like turn things into tokens. Like I have particular pieces of jewelry that I'm like, I do like just like intention setting, where I'm like, this ring helps me feel confident. And it's like, literally I'm just saying this thing about this piece of jewelry and then reinforcing it by when I wear it and I'm like, I feel really confident. I'm like, thanks, ring that makes me feel really confident. And it totally works. It's a great hack. I recommend if you have a few favorite pieces of jewelry, you start deciding what they're all for and then profit.
Yeah. But I would love to see what the chemistry is. And I don't think that we have this capability yet of like, what is chemically happening in your brain that triggers you to feel more confident because you have a piece of jewelry? Like, because I look at the jewelry and I'm like, this is just metal. This is just metal and maybe a stone. Hopefully not mined by some children in Africa. It doesn't actually have anything lucky about it. And yet the reaction I have to having it on, like that sense of security, security blanket probably plays a lot of the same role. Like,
Yeah.
Wow. I have more, if something bad happens, if I get bad news and I'm wearing certain things, I have thrown out, or I've recycled or thrown out clothes if I've been wearing it, like when something bad has happened. I'll sometimes have that kind of a response where it's like, not, oh, the clothes made this happen, but it's more just like sometimes the memory can be so, so like jarring when I see it, that if I have a bad association with that, I've definitely remember the outfit I was wearing when I got laid off once, and I have not touched it since. So
that's like it's tainted or some dark cloud on it.
You don't want to bring that energy into
no.
But if you give those clothes away at like Goodwill or something, do they still hold that dark energy? Have you like condemned a series of people to losing their jobs?
The layoff outfit, trash. It was also kind of on its way anyway. But yeah, like I find that's like the other like more negative end of that spectrum though, is like sometimes things can then be tainted, and then what does it take to like re-swing it to the other end of the spectrum where something then becomes kind of lucky.
Yeah. The big one for me is like if people are talking about good outcomes and it's not certain yet, I'm like, don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. Don't talk about it. You're going to jinx it. Everything's going to go to shit. Like, the other shoe is going to drop. There's something about being like, yeah, this is going to work out, where I'm just like, la, 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 la.
Yeah. I definitely like become a Southern Italian peasant when people start talking about like bad things. I'm like, no. I'm going to spit on you and put you in a corner.
Bury some statues in the front yard.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. So many.
Well, and numbers too. I found the number stuff really fascinating. Like and it's different depending on the country. In Western countries, 13 is terribly unlucky. But in China, it's the number 4 because it's pronounced the same way that the word for death is, while the number 8 is like super lucky. And people will try and get phone numbers with as many 8s in them as they possibly can. And this is why the Beijing Summer Olympics were scheduled when they were. They were scheduled to start August 8th, 2008. So 888. So yeah, auspicious. And again, a lot of it comes down to that can't hurt, might help.
Yeah.
Can't hurt, might help. Yeah.
So pick those pennies up, people. As long as it's heads up, never tails.
Laura, thank you so much for joining us again. And would you remind listeners what your book is called so they can find it?
Yes, it is called Do You Believe in Magic? And it is available pretty much anywhere online. And if you don't find it in your bookstore, ask if they'll carry it. And same as your library.
Always great advice.
The Weirdest Thing I Learned This Week is produced by all of our hosts, including me, Rachel Feltman, along with Jess Bodie, who also serves as our audio engineer and editor extraordinaire. Our theme music is by Billy Cadden. Our logo is by Katie Beloff. If you have questions, suggestions, or weird stories to share, tweet us at weirdest_thing. Thanks for listening, weirdos.